All right, good evening. Let's call this meeting of the Sacramento Metropolitan Fire District Board of Directors for Thursday, February 9th to order. Director Kelly, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Director. The Metro Cable announcement. The open session meeting is videotaped for cablecast on Metro Cable 14. Replay is on Saturday, February 11th, 2017 at 4 p.m. and Monday, February 13, 2017 at 12 noon on Channel 14. The webcast is at www.sacmetrocable.tv. The open session meetings are also available for viewing on the district website at www.metrofire.ca.gov. Now we'll have opportunity for members of the public to comment on matters of public interest within the district's jurisdiction, either on or not on the agenda. Do we have any speakers?
There are no speakers this evening.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to the consent calendar.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we adopt. I second.
I've got a motion and a second. Any questions or comments on the consent?
Only one, Mr. Chair.
Director?
I sure wish that a Ford dealership in our first-in area, our district, sure would have bid a little bit closer. You know, it'd be nice to have them win the bid, so we'll just have to encourage Senator Ford and some other Ford dealers in our first-in area to bid a little lower. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Also on the bidding process, undoubtedly there is a standard procedure, isn't it? Not necessarily for the cheapest buyer, but one for the one that fits our specification, isn't that correct? Shouldn't that be the driver?
Chief, you have something to comment, or John, would you comment on that?
It's kind of a complex and, what I want to say, a compound question. It depends upon the type of contract that is being looked at by the board. There's certain public works contracts that have to go out, and if you meet the specifications of the bid, then it's basically a lower bid situation. There's some contracts that are professional service contracts and other contracts along those lines that are not required to go out to bid. There's other contracts that are for certain kinds of goods or services where you have a limited number of vendors or professionals who can provide it, which is a different set of legal standards that apply to those kind of sole source issues. And then there's others that allow you, the board to take into account not only whether it's the lowest price for a particular good or service, but whether or not it represents what would be the best provision of good or services to the board. So that's the basic lay of the land legally on how the purchase contracts work.
Yeah, coming out of the federal service, that is the procedure we had there. It wasn't necessarily the lowest, but one who fit the specification. For instance, if you were buying a submarine, the vendors are very limited, or other special weapons or something. So that's not a catch-all kind of thing. It's dependent on the necessity to it, and the Secretary of Defense, if it was a pencil something was needed extremely well, that price might be cost more. Thank you.
Any other comments on the consent calendar? We've got a motion and a second. Would you call for the vote, please?
Director Gale.
Yes.
Gould.
Aye.
Barnes.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Sheets.
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
Kelly.
Aye.
And Wood.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to presentation items. Looks like CFO Thomas and Mr. Nash, you've got two items on here.
Good evening, directors, Chief Harms, Amanda Thomas, Chief Financial Officer. And I am pleased this evening to introduce the presentation of the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report for fiscal year 2015-16, otherwise referred to as the CAFR. As you know, this is the third year that the district has produced a CAFR, and we continue to do so really in the spirit of just providing full financial transparency for you, the Board of Directors, for for the district's employees, for members of the public, really anyone who's interested in the financial performance of the district. Also, as you know, each of the district's first two CAFRs received the Government Finance Officers Association Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting, and this 15-16 CAFR has also been submitted to the GFOA, and we believe that it will meet the high standards of that program and are hopeful that it will also be awarded that certificate. The FY 15-16 CAFR has been audited by the district's independent auditor, Richardson and Company, and Brian Nash from Richardson is here this evening to present the results of their audit. I should mention that the CAFR received a clean opinion, so he'll present the results of their audit, the information presented in the CAFR, as well as certain other compliance reports. And before I turn it over to Brian, I did also want to take this opportunity really to thank everyone involved in producing the CAFR, which, of course, the staff in the finance division, the work that they do all year is really what makes this possible, but all of the other divisions in the district that contribute to putting the CAFR together, particularly Marie Bernal, who spends a lot of time with the layout and the way the report looks. So I wanted to make that acknowledgement, as well as to thank Richardson and their partnership with us. So with that, I will turn it over to Brian Nash.
Good evening. So that was a really good introduction. We're going to be presenting several documents. One thing before we get started, I just wanted to mention, you may be used to my partner, Ingrid Scheiplein, performing the audit. This year, because I'm a different partner, you've satisfied the California Government Code requirements for rotation of audit partners. There's a requirement under the California Government Code to rotate audit partners, not necessarily audit firms, after a 6-year period. She's done the audit a number of years, so this satisfies that requirement. Okay, and getting into the reports that we've issued, you should see the district prepares the CAFR. Our opinion is in the CAFR. That's what you pay us for. There's a governance letter. That's a letter of required disclosures to a governing body such as yourself. There's internal control and compliance reports. We do what's called a single audit because you receive federal money, and there's some compliance reports in that document. And then there's an appropriations limit report that you're required to do under the California Government Code. So, as was already mentioned, we had a clean opinion on the financial statements. We had no audit adjustments. The controls, internal controls were very good, as we noticed during our audit. The district completed all the closing entries prior to our audit. It's quite an extensive closing process to close the financial statements, close the books for an organization this large, and staff did a really good job. It really takes quite a long time to record all the entries to report your numbers on the accrual basis. There are no unadjusted audit differences this year, so your accounting records are really clean. Getting into, these are June 30, 2016 numbers. There's a couple of items that I'd like to mention. The property tax revenues increased quite a bit, $5.9 million during that year. I believe up to $125 million. Charges for services decreased $9.9 million. Salaries and benefits decreased $6.4 million, and that was mainly due to changes in the pension balances. There's a lot of requirements to record different balances due to your pension plan. There was a statement that was implemented last year, GASB Statement Number 68. It's quite an extensive pronouncement. Services and supplies decreased $4.2 million, and that was mainly due to lower cost in the IGT program. That's one of your Medicare programs. And there's a good description of all of these items in what's called the management's discussion and analysis in the front of the CAFR. And revenues exceeded expenses by $2.3 million in the general fund. So the general fund is the fund that is related to your budget. That's how your budget is reported. So it showed $2.3 million of excess revenues over expenses. One of the larger items in your report, as I mentioned, is the pension liability. It increased from $298 million to $324 million this year, and that was largely due to lower investment earnings in your CalPERS pension plans. Unrestricted net position was actually a deficit of $412 million, and that's mainly due to those pension liabilities that you have to record. There's a pension liability and there's a pension debt that's recorded that results in negative net position. So it's quite a large number, but one thing to keep in mind is the Pension Reform Act that the state passed a few years back. It's called PEPRA. We may remember that. It requires reduced benefits starting in 2013 for new hires. And the PEPRA plan is starting to show up with some larger numbers in your CAFR in the 2016 year. And so the big question that everybody's asking me is it enough? And that's the big question these days, is that Pension Reform Act that's reduced the benefits, is it going to do what it's intended and kind of get the pension liabilities under control? So this is the equity section of your balance sheet on the full accrual basis. And it shows you had $71 million of net investment in capital assets. That's basically the part of your net position that you can't spend because you'd have to sell your assets first. There's some restricted net position, $3.6 million, and that's for items such as amounts held for bond payments and grant amounts that haven't been spent. And then there's your unrestricted net position, $412 million deficit position. That's actually reduced a little bit from the previous year by $13.5 million. And so here's the long-term liabilities that are basically causing the negative net position. Pension liabilities at the top there, and there's a pension bond, OPEB, which is post-retirement health care benefits liability. And there's a workers' comp liability, compensated absences, which is vacation, sick leave. There's some leases and lease revenue bonds. So that's $500 million. So our compliance reports report no weaknesses in internal control, so that you have a really good system of internal controls, which is important to protect the district's assets. You received $1.5 million in federal money, and so because of that, we had to perform what's called a single audit to test compliance with the requirements of those federal grants. The Ground Emergency Medical Transportation Program was tested this year, and we found it to be in compliance with federal requirements. There is one new pronouncement that's looming on the horizon that's going to be a significant one for most governments. There's going to be a change in the accounting for the what's called the OPEB, the other post-employment benefits plan, which is the retiree health benefits. It's going to make the counting and reporting similar to what's now in your CAFR due to your pension plan. It's going to change the accounting a little bit. Currently, there's a report in your CAFR, it's called Required Supplementary Information, that shows there's a $213 million liability. That entire liability is not reported on the balance sheet the way the accounting is done currently. So this pronouncement would require the entire liability to be reported on the balance sheet. And also, some of the accounting changes may increase that liability a little bit. One of the things that changes in this pronouncement is once the plan runs out of cash to pay the liabilities, it has to have a reduced interest rate. And so that may increase the liability just a little bit. So that's required to be implemented in 2018, fiscal year end in 2018. So with that, I'm done with my formal presentation. I'll be happy to answer questions.
Mr. President?
Are there any questions? Yes.
On unfunded liabilities, how do we get in trouble on those? How would you address that?
Are you
Reducing.
Are you speaking of pension and?
Unfunded liabilities, yes.
So there's pension liabilities, as I mentioned, the Pension Reform Act
Right.
has reduced the benefits for new hires, and so everybody's looking at that, that change in the law and change in the benefits that's provided to reduce those liabilities over time. So that's one way to address that. You know, what benefits you provide is subject to your union negotiation, so it's part of that process. The other post-employment benefits liability, it may change when this new pronouncement comes out, and, you know, that might be a good time to look at what you have. A lot of governments are looking at their post-retirement health care benefits currently to just make sure they make sense. And so that's a decision that has to be made at the policy level.
Because unfunded liabilities will create a mountain down the road if we don't address it presently.
Unfunded liabilities, there's, you know, it increases over time because there's
course.
interest that's required to be recorded based on those liabilities. So left unaddressed, it could result in increases over time. That's why a lot of governments are looking at those benefits.
Anything else, Director Gale?
Sir, did I hear you correctly when you said that we see about a $25 million difference in our liability based on projections from PERS that were not met? Seemed to me like in one of your slides, it said that our net change
Yes.
was about $25 million from what
Yes.
was projected to be generated out of PERS and what was actual.
The latest valuation, which is a couple years old now, it takes a while for CalPERS to prepare those valuations, but the latest valuation, which was as of June 30, 2015, it showed lower investment earnings than the projected earnings that CalPERS uses. They project 7.5% or 7.65% that year, and it came in much lower. And so that was one of the reasons. Sometimes, some years, the investment earnings are up, and sometimes they're down.
Yeah.
And so their
More down
goal,
than up, right?
Well, their goal is to try to make sure the investment rate of return assumption meets the long-term.
Right. I think it's just
return.
important for people to understand that this organization and all the good faith that we did and all the budgeting that the men and women did is the best we could do, and yet we're dependent on the accuracy of those projections, because when they miss the mark, it puts a tremendous amount of pressure on this organization and like organizations in the state, because then we've got to assume that that new liability that wasn't in our contracts, wasn't in our budgets, and now we're stuck with a new reality that changes the landscape significantly. And at the end of the day, it could have an impact on services. And that's where I get pretty stressed, is when they miss the mark, it's all no big deal. But it is a big deal to us down here in the local trenches trying to provide an actual touch service to our, to our public. And so I just didn't, we throw big numbers around like it's no big deal, but $25 million is a big deal to this organization. The amount of service that we could enhance is significant. And so I just don't want those things to get lost in these nice presentations where it's 50 million
Right.
here and 25 million. That's a big chunk of change that we had nothing to do with. And yet we're stuck with the result of that for many years to come, no doubt. So, would that be accurate? You're the accountant. I just play one on TV.
I guess in their defense, they are kind of dependent
You're
on.
defending them?
Well, I'm just
Careful.
just saying that they're dependent on the investment returns of the market overall as
Sure.
well. So
I just wish
they
they'd
have
be a-
some control, but not complete control over those numbers.
Fair enough. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Director Barnes, you had something? I do not. One thing I didn't see was a discussion about the pre-funding of the OPEB when you were talking about the OPEB benefits. Did I miss that, or is that something that is not going to be accounted for?
That would be accounted for in the next valuation. Yes, I should have mentioned that. I did hear from staff that there was a contribution to the OPEB plan. And that's a good thing, because with this new accounting standard on the horizon, to have more assets in the plan is a good thing. So that was a very good point. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Nash. Ms. Thomas, did that cover both items? All right. We'll move on to reports then. I don't have anything for the president's report. Chief Harms, your report?
Board members. Quite a few things kind of going on within the district I wanted to talk about. The first one was on Tuesday was Chief Taylor's last day after 28 years of service. And as much as all of us wanted him to be here and do things like that, he refused almost every one of them, except for a little cupcake party that we had for him. But for me, it was over just a short period of time, the two of us had become very close. I'm going to miss him being gone, and we wish him well in retirement. At the same time, Captain Item went back out to the field, and Chris Vestel is the new PIO, and I think a lot of you guys know him for that. He was on EMS 24 and has been involved in before you a number of times, and he hit the ground running, and look forward to the next couple of years with him being the PIO. The EMS 24 captains, there's some new captains. We had a switch over there. Captain Tracy Valentine, Shawnee Cornell, and Jim Devati is our three new captains that are in there, and that will be exciting for them on that side. And we had a promotion for Communications Tech 2. James Day is over there, and that's a new position for him. Myself and the clerk the other day met up with, I guess we would call him retired director Jack Scheidegger, and presented him with the plaque and along with the resolution that was done. And so he wanted me to pass along a hello to each one of you, and that he missed you. He did have some comments for Director Orzali, but since he's not here, we'll leave those off to the side.
Oh, we should read them out.
This has been quite the budget week or so, is that as we're finishing up the past year, we spent the last few days going through the mid-year review. We had a very detailed meeting today of going through the review. Chief Casantini, along with CFO Thomas, ran that meeting where we went line by line. I was also very happy to see Local 522 was here with us as we went through and looked at where we're at in the mid-year and looked overall with the different department heads on where we want to be. A lot of people have asked me what's the difference between a district and a city. And I'll have to say one of the big things is that portion of it, and more cooperation and people sitting at the table and talking about versus being in the city where we basically just went in there and fought, and then they just told us how much money we had and we left. So I was very happy with doing that and going through it. Meeting with a lot of folks, but one thing that is positive is to bring back to the board is that on the Zinfandel site, there's been a number of things that we needed to do to finish what I would call the certification of that site. And last week, I was able to meet with the OES, right? OES, and the last portion of $170,000 is now available. Where's he at? Chief Shannon. One of his new jobs coming in is to be able to sit down, do that, and him and I have both talked about not delaying that and not letting that go any farther. But I would like to say it was because of me, but it was the past work that's been done by a lot of folks to be able to get to that point. And I know on the one group that we've been talking about as far as the training group of getting that done has been a priority, and I think that we are on that path now moving forward. So that's really good news. Had some meetings with the chief in El Dorado Hills. Mike Dahl, the firefighter burn institute director, has sat down, and as you know, I think most of you know, is that this weekend is the Fill the Boot coming up, and it's on the corner of Sunrise and Greenback. Runs through today through Sunday, right? Through Sunday. And if you haven't known, the chief challenge is on Saturday from 9 to 10. I will be passing around my boots tonight, but that'll be okay. We'll get all that done. Zinfandel, on the first floor, the tenants moved out at the first of the year. Myself and Jeff Fry, thank you. Little brain dead. Went downstairs. There is some activity happening, and that's very good, because if you look back probably about 60 days ago, there was no activity, but getting past the first of the year as far as some opportunities for some tenants to come in here. I was very impressed that they left probably worth somewhere between about $500,000 worth of furniture downstairs that's in place, and all the infrastructure is still there. So we're moving forward with that too. We did the mid-year. Assistant Chief Johnson is here tonight, but he went the other day and spoke on behalf of the district. He went over to the Citrus Heights Leadership Group and spoke about Metro Fire, our relationship with Citrus Heights and the service that we provided. So some real positive interaction with the community where we're at. Myself and a number of members went down to San Diego at the beginning of the week and attended a conference called Firehouse World. And it is probably one of the premier ones as far as what's happening in the fire service, the EMS side of it. A lot of good speakers, but it's one of those things of, for me to be together with folks for a couple days and getting away from here and spending some time together and talking about was a very, very positive on that side. The last thing that I want to do, and I know he's back there, is if I can ask Captain Matt Stewart to come up. And I'm going to ask him just to speak just for a couple of seconds for me during my time. And one of the things that it took me 4 months to get together with Matt and the Firefighter Association and meet. And shame on me for that side of it, because I really didn't understand the role and what they do for our members every single day and the support that they give our members. And sitting with them, and I was, the group that was there was a young group. I know they work closely with 522, and really the focus on both sides of them isn't about themselves, but what we can do. And I'm going to ask him just real quick, put him on the spot to say just a few words about the association and some things that are coming up, and say on my side how much, as far as the administrative side, we want to be able to help and support them in their function and their support of our people.
I'm a little unprepared, I apologize, and sometimes I wish I had a stool to make me look a little taller. So, but thank you, Chief. Again, we had a good meeting last Friday. It was nice having you over to the station for lunch. I think for you coming from Phoenix, meeting us and figuring out kind of what we do, I thought that was a good way to bridge ourselves together to hopefully come together for the future. And I know I've been talking with Brenda here recently, so it sounds like the district's going to be assisting, and it's all in writing, with the upcoming retirement dinner and for this upcoming retirement dinner from here on out as well. So that's pretty much, again, a thank you for taking the steps forward to help with that. So for myself, I'm the current president of the association. Some of you may have seen some of my emails that I put out for some of the events and functions that we do, and we're pretty much there. We're a support unit for the additional functions that we do outside of work for not just the firefighters, but all the day staff personnel. Their families are included. We are kind of I told Chief, I said, we're kind of like the party planners for events outside of work that we have for people to come and bring their families. I think the biggest thing for us is we like trying to instill the family aspect of the fire service. I myself, I call myself a nugget. My dad retired from the agency back in 2008, so I've been around this department in this region ever since I was born within the agency. So I remember seeing a transition from a little kid, and I even have a little snippet from me being in the old Suffin that Rancho Cordova used to have that was out filling the boot. There's a picture of myself and my brother and my mom in the top of that thing, probably back in the mid-'80s, and it was something that made the B. So for me, it's something for myself that is very true and dear to my heart, and for me, I'm trying to establish a tradition of this agency and the association from here going forward for the future leaders of this agency. So that's kind of what we're here for. That's what we do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Chief, for having me.
You bet. The only other thing is just these next 2 Mondays are holidays for at least for the staff here. The rest of the members will be out there still working. That ends my report unless you guys have any questions or comments.
Any questions or comments for the chief? Thank you so much, Chief.
You bet.
Assistant Chief Quinn, you've got the operations report.
Board of Directors, Chief Harms, good evening. I'm here this evening with the Ops Board report. So since we last met, we've had 4,127 calls since our last report, 12 of which were structure fires, other related service calls, and obviously some that were derived through the wind and storm events that we've been seeing. On the EMS side of the house, Metro Fire had 3,039 dispatches, keeping up with transporting at 69% of the time. Our good partners at AMR had 422 dispatches and transported 58.9% of the time. That's kind of the hard and fast numbers. I'd also like to take a moment to talk about really the weather that we've been seeing. And I think oftentimes you'll hear people even ask us the question in the field, wow, you know, obviously with all this rain, must be real slow in the fire service. And I think what's important to note is that during these last storm events, that our members have been supportive in lots of different roles throughout the county of Sacramento, from assisting staffing at the county OES Emergency Operations Center to attending daily conference calls on what's happening in the region as far as storms, wind damage, and other hazards that lie out there for the members of the public. And then, of course, the emergency responses that our members are making every single day, from assisting in flooded vehicles to homes, other types of services that they may need, from the helicopter actually picking people off and out of hazardous locations, or providing additional eyes in the sky and situational awareness for other partner agencies. Those are the types of things that Metro Fire is involved in on a daily basis. So while we are a fire district, there's lots of other things that we're participating in daily through these activities to keep the members of the public safe. Lastly, I just want to bring up something that's been in the news here quite a bit in the last few days that I think everybody's been watching, and I don't know if you necessarily say, hey, how does this impact Sacramento? It's up on the screen there, but the Oroville Dam situation. So if you've happened to hear about that in the news, beginning Tuesday, and what you see up on the screen is a portion of the primary spillway started to erode. Significant erosion and damage has taken place. Obviously, we're continuing to get rain, and at some point that dam is going to be at capacity. What's important to note is while that's at Oroville, 75 miles to the north of us, the waterways there eventually feed into the Sacramento River. You know, what does that do for members of the public? Well, in the vein of being a forward-thinking agency in the county of Sacramento being prepared, we're involved in the discussions about this very issue, something that's almost an hour and a half away from our homes. And the why is so that we're prepared for the members of the public that we serve. In this particular case, Department of Water Resources is on it. They're actually preparing this to be able to handle additional water. You're seeing that on the news. They're clearing some trees and debris to allow that spillway to do what it needs to do without washing additional things down into the Feather River Canyon. And then they're set up with contingencies to offer to the emergency spillway again, they have a contingency in place for that. And furthermore, that even if that spillway, they needed more capacity, that dam is actually prepared to handle an overtop situation. So for people that say, wow, what if it got over the top and there'd be issues, that has been engineered to be able to handle that as well. All that aside, the county, local emergency services, and our partners are in constant discussions about preparedness and what to do when we have increase in water levels so that our community remains safe. We're way ahead of that. We're having discussions every single day to make sure that we can be properly prepared should there be any additional issues. So if there's not any other questions, have a good evening.
Any questions?
Mr. President, I was looking at that. It said that Folsom is what, 70%? Well, 30% more they could put in there without any problem. And that was a gentleman, I think he probably was a retired water person or whatever, and he was talking about the flowway there. And would there be any possibility of, I know on the aircraft, and things were bombed or something, there was some quick cement they could drop into these kind of things on runways and what have you, repair them the Navy did it during World War II, quite prevalent and fast. With the cement, could that be a possibility of solving that problem temporarily?
Well, Director Gale, in the vein of being in the fire service and wanting to solve every problem and always being a can-do person, because that's how I was trained in the fire service, that is way out of my ability to answer that. Although I would say that with some of the things that I'm hearing with Department of Water Resources, some of the things they're using, the technology, those folks have literally been in that hole and looking at it.
Yeah.
So I know that they've got some great engineers and things that are watching that. They're monitoring it 24 hours a day for any changes. So I would expect that if that capability exists, they're absolutely going to exercise that. They've been very, very forward on this,
Yeah.
and I'm confident that they're going to implement some great repairs.
Any other questions for Chief
Thank you.
Quinn? Nope. Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Chief. Appreciate that. Next, we'll move on to General Counsel's report. And 522.
Good evening, President of the Board, Board of Directors, Chief Harm, and staff. I don't have a lot to report out on tonight, other than it was nice to go to the budget meeting today. And although that we do have a small deficit, it's nice to see that it's not like it's been in years past, which is a good indication that the district's moving in the right direction. It's also been nice to work with Chief Harmons and staff when we've ever had an issue come up, to be able to just to walk into his office with him and Chief Shan and talk about the issue and resolve it. It hasn't been that way for the last 4 years, and it's nice to be able to do that again. And that's all I have, if any of you guys have any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Barksdale? Thank you so much. Committee and delegate reports. The executive committee has not met since we've last met, and there is nothing on the calendar at this time. The Communication Center JPA, Chief Bridge, or Casantini.
Yes, good evening, President, Board of Directors, and Chief Harms, Greg Castletini for Eric Bridge. The Communications Center JPA committee met here on January 31st at 9 a.m. We approved board policies. And our next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, February 28th at 9 a.m. here in the boardroom. That's all in the report.
Thank you so much, Chief. The California Fire and Rescue Training JPA, Director Kelly.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, as I've reported for quite a while now, the JPA has not met since I last reported out. There is a meeting, however, scheduled for March 16th here at the SESC, 4 p.m.
Thank you so much. And the Finance and Audit Committee, Director Kelly.
The Finance and Audit Committee met at our last meeting. We reported out at that time, and we will meet again next, the 23rd, is it? Yes, the 23rd, when our esteemed Vice Chair has her first opportunity to chair a committee meeting at Metro Fire.
Outstanding. Moving on to the Policy Committee, Director Gold.
The Policy Committee will meet a month from tonight. Please put it on all of your calendars for March 9th, 2017 at 5:30. I expect everyone to be there.
Thank you. We'll move on to board member questions and comments. Start to my left with Director Kelly.
There is a,
Let's start with Director Kelly.
Down that guy.
I thought you said Gail.
So I'd like to congratulate Chief Taylor. Captain Edom, hope she enjoys being back out on the line and would expect big things to happen to her while she's there. Can't be sure he's watching, but there's a good chance of it. I'd like to say hi to Jack Scheider, and I'm glad that you guys had an opportunity to recognize him and present him with what you did. And then the certification of Zinfandel is something that I think all the board members are excited about. Yeah, let's get that done. Thank you.
Director Clark.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank the Richardson and Company, specifically Mr. Brian Nash, also our financial division and staff for their reports. I also want to congratulate Chief Taylor on his retirement. That's all I have tonight, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Director. Director Sheets.
I also wanted to congratulate Chief Taylor on his retirement and congratulate the new PIO, Chris, on his new appointment, and also hopefully the success of the fill of the boot of this weekend. So that's all.
Thank you, Director. Move all the way to the right. Director Gale.
What I plan to do eventually to go into my area and in Division 1, I live in that area, and, well, I several school boards, and I cover that, but I would like to go and try to meet as many people as possible. And for, off-time, we forget about Placer County, just a few up there, but it's very important. And the message of the Metro Fire District, as the presentation you made, we do more than just put out fires. Rescue is most important. We do a lot of valuable things, and as I always say, there's no free lunch, and the quality of service requires revenue. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Director Gold.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank the financial team and all of those involved in such glaringly good reports that we receive. I think it really is a testament to the transparency that we have, that we can have these kinds of reports done. And I'm always glad to get on them when they say things that the public needs to understand a little bit better. Godspeed to Chief Taylor and his family, and thank them for all the years that they supported him as he provided service to all of us. And then finally, I'd like to challenge my colleagues, if I could, to this year potentially taking a look at two issues that are becoming more and more impactful to this organization and its ability to provide service. The first one, is we're all familiar with, is called wall time. I think it's high time that we take a look at not only the immediate impact that wall time has on our service, but also the long-term impacts that it's having on our men and women. It is unacceptable, and we have to do something as electeds to insert ourselves if we don't see movement. I think wall time is completely something that we need to jump on top of. The other thing that I'd like to take a look at is the issue of automatic aid. There is not parity in the system today. And what that does is put a lot of strain on this agency, and I think it's time that we join hands collectively with other potentially elected officials that oversee the fire service, and we need to sit down and come up with a mutual aid or a automatic aid, because it's not mutual. And we need to figure out a way where we can come together where the impact is less on Metro and spread out to other agencies. And I think it's high time we do that so that we can enjoy some of those services back in our primary response area. And so I challenge us as leaders of this organization to take a look at those two issues and resolve them in some way this year. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Director. Director Jones.
Thank you. I'd like to reiterate actually all the points that my fellow directors have made up to this point, and a re-emphasis on congratulations to Chief Darren Taylor on his retirement. 100 years ago, we worked a strike team together up in the northern part of California, and I've seen him progress in his career and wish him the best. And again, as I always say, the best promotion ever is to reach a safe and healthy retirement. So congratulations, Chief Taylor. I'd also like to thank some members of the staff, Board Clerk Padilla, CFO Thomas, and Chief Casatini for their help on several different items, including assisting with a venue for Special District Advisory Committee to LAFCO. We needed a venue, and the board clerk really saved us and helped us out. CFO Thomas helped me go through some of these pages on the CAFR report, and I very much appreciate that effort. And there were several issues brought up to me by district residents, and Chief Casatini and his team were able to resolve those, and I was able to close that circle on that information. So I very, very much appreciate that. Hooray for Zinfandel training. Let's move forward. That's great. But then another serious point here in regards to that CAFR report. Metro Fire, pre-2013 in PEPRA, had already established additional funding for OPEB, for retiree health, and for contributions to the retirement system. I'd like everyone to realize this somewhat historical perspective that Metro took one of the first steps before any other agency and before any other state legislation occurred to address these issues, and we will continue to address them in a fair, hopefully successful, ongoing way. We will continue to look at these financials and move forward on this for the benefit of the district, our employees, because that is what makes us a successful emergency services delivery system. Like Director Gale mentioned, it's not just fires, it's an entire all-risk emergency response group. And that covers a lot of ground. And we continue to do that. And because we have addressed long-term concerns, and we will continue to do so.
Thank you, Director. Director Barnes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Echo the comments everybody said. I appreciate the Finance Division to be able to create such a transparent report, and when the audit comes in and says that that's ill of any flaws, it's really nice to hear. Transparency is most important. I know to the board with this agency. Glad to hear 522 is in the door with the chief and sitting at the table, and it's working together as a team. I've always said, as a team, collectively, we put together a great product. So it's nice to hear those conversations being had and moving forward. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Talking about teams, near and dear to my heart, the Guns N' Hoses football. Sorry, but the Law side did win this year, 14-11, but it was a great game. And I will tell you, one thing I really wanted to point out was Chief Quinn was the youngest one on the team playing. No, but the Fireside is a class act. This is a tradition 43 years going, and I tell people, you throw the number 43 out, it sounds like a number, but when you put context behind it, this was the year 51 for Super Bowl. So it's only 8 years behind the Super Bowl when you talk about it, and you talk about the legacy. Longest running game of its kind in the nation. And for the Fire to step up 15 years ago and get on board to make sure this tradition going is greatly appreciated to the organization, the cause, and the charities. But one thing happened after that game, and Chief Quinn, I think, is his leadership on that team of the Fireside. It's never happened since I've been playing, been a part of it. At the end of the game, they took a knee, sat there while the Law side accepted the trophies for winning the game, and that was a class act. But that speaks to the people and the character in this organization that are able to do that after a hard-fought battle. You know, you don't want to lose, but they stayed there and then came together as a team at the end, as a group, both Law and Fire. But again, I say that's what happens when bad things happen. There's that call for help. It doesn't matter what patch you're wearing, everybody comes for help, just like in floods, just like in emergency. So for that, Chief Quinn, your team, first class, but I don't expect anything less because you're part of this organization. So thank you. We look forward to many more years. Thank you for the support, Chief, staff, everybody that came out and supported it along the way. We truly appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you, Director. Only thing I'd add, my first meeting was in February of 2013, and we were going over our financial reports at that point, and there were a list of about 18 different items that the auditors found that needed to be corrected. And in the 3 years since then, we've had a zero, what do you call it, zero findings? I don't know. But it's just been amazing. So that says a lot for your team, Amanda, for Ron, and everyone else in your department. So thank you. Our next meeting will be February 23rd at 6 o'clock right here. And we'll see you all then. Thank you.